Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy podcast. This is episode 204, Literacy Hive Mind, Highlights with the Community. Recently, we offered a free virtual meetup to practice some choir nerdery. If you missed it, I have carefully curated some of the most useful and interesting moments for this episode. Discussion topics were derived from a survey response from 120-ish educators. The full 2-hour and 15-minute work session is available unedited over at Patreon or Substack for show supporters. But we had a great time discussing, and I picked some of the most fun moments for you to hear in this episode. We talked about fundamentals of literacy instruction, concepts related to rhythm instruction, structuring of programs, aka do we have gendered ensembles for beginners, leveled classes, y'all come, those types of scenarios that many of us teach in. We talked about the science of reading for music, dividing the beginning groups into ever-shifting groups throughout the course of a rehearsal process, different ways to teach kids to hear music in different contexts. And in the full version, we even take a little dive into one of my 10th grade literacy lessons from last school year. So don't miss it. Not only will you get some tips and tricks related to previous PD that we've offered here on Choralosophy for free, but from some other awesome teachers offering their perspectives, problems, and approaches. So tune in and have your thinking stimulated and challenged, and then weigh in on anything you hear or ask questions over at the Facebook Choralosophers group or on the Substack at choralosophy.substack.com. Ludus, the platform trusted by thousands of organizers to power their event ticketing, marketing, and fundraising, has just upped its game with an incredible new feature, volunteer management. Now you can streamline your volunteer coordination like never before. Volunteers can easily sign up for opportunities and shifts online while you effortlessly approve sign-ups, track hours, and manage your volunteer team. Say goodbye to volunteer management headaches and hello to seamless coordination with Ludus. Try it at ludus.com/Choralosophy and revolutionize your events. Before we get into the meat of the show, I'm going to keep this quick. Big announcement. Super excited. All the choir teachers in the audience. Sight Reading Factory is introducing self-assessment. They should have it up and going and fully functional by the time the school year starts. I've been beta testing it for a while, and it is really, really good. And I am so excited to show you some demos on the social media, Choralosophy, so be looking for that this summer. The hours and hours you've been spending self-grading could possibly be over. So don't forget to enter the Choralosophy checkout code when you renew your new and improved Sight Reading Factory membership for next school year. The producers and Inner Circle at Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, Jonah Clicksbull, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, DF, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. This is going to be fun. I've got here all together, I'd kind of advertise this event as a free workshop where anybody who signs up is going to get this whole conversation / workshop / idea session, brainstorm, whatever it is. And I'll publish it to the people who put their name in the form in its entirety. And then hopefully something fun and exciting and interesting happens while we're here. And I'll generate some highlights for the general audience from that as well. But I got about 100 at last check, 120 people signed up for this, but also with the knowledge that you didn't actually have to come and be here. I got several messages from folks who said, I'm just going to sign up even though I know I can't come, and then they'll watch it later. So we'll see, and I've still got people clicking in here. So here's what I did. I took the 120-ish responses that you put into the form over there on Anywhere Seat, which is a Ludus product, by the way, which I tried to use as an experiment for the first time to use their online kind of event kind of software system. It's relatively new. I like it so far. I chose to make this one free. And so we're going to just kind of do this as an experiment. I've always wanted to do something like this. And I tend to not plan things very well ahead of time. So this is by far the most response that I've gotten to one of these. So what I did was I took all your responses about what you already do for music literacy or any other types of topics you wanted to talk about. I put in some of your responses that were challenges, things you face. And please don't judge me, but I think this is an awesome thing and an awesome tool. I put all 120 responses into ChatGPT, and I said, okay, summarize what all these choir teachers are thinking about, asking about, and talking about, so that I didn't have to go and find those common threads. I want to try to do more of these, and I want to try to do them for free. The way that I do that, though, is with your support. Everything I try to make it so that everything is free on the podcast. And so the way we do that is, of course, you hear this if you're a regular listener. Use the Choralosophy checkout code. It helps you and it helps me a lot. When you do Sight Reading Factory, My Music Folders, Graphite Publishing, Endeavor Publishing. So use that, saves you money, and it lets them know that you're here. I'd actually like to start with a question that got submitted almost immediately right before I signed on by somebody who signed up but told me that they would not be able to be here. And this is from Clinton, and he kind of gets privilege because he hired me to come down and do a PD at his school last summer. So I'm putting his question right here at the front. And the question is, I talk a lot about on the show the idea that we should be programming repertoire that is within the oral and musical vocabularies of our students, not overkicking our coverage, so to speak, giving them music that they can handle with what they already know how to do. And I think his question is, how do you do that without boring them? And how do you find music, a repertoire, for example, that corresponds with, say, Sight Reading Factory Level 1? And so my response to him, and I think we're going to start there, and then this will be a good first topic to open up to questions and thoughts as well, is that I responded to Clinton that I don't think of it that way. And the reason that I don't think of it that way is for exactly why he was concerned. If you're familiar with Sight Reading Factory, you would know that what level 1 is. It's basically just quarter notes and half notes, and they're stepwise. And oftentimes it has a 5 or 6 note range total. So yes, obviously performance repertoire that only did that would be like watching paint dry. And it's not something that we would probably enjoy teaching, and it's definitely not something we'd want to spend 6 weeks rehearsing and then performing in front of an audience. And so the way I would ask us to think about this is that when we do our literacy work every day the way I advocate for it, there's lots of correct answers, but the way I suggest doing it is about 5 or 6 minutes each day. We go to the exercises that they can learn to read fluently in 5 or 6 minutes. So a beginning 9th grade choir, in my case, and I think this would be true even in 6th grade, 7th grade situations that I've seen before, a choir at the very beginning of the school year might really need to do level 1s, maybe unison level 1 at the very beginning of the school year, so that in those first few days they can have the experience of, here's what the starting pitch sounds like, or here's what the tonic sounds like, here's how we develop that audio library in our head for this very small little simple exercise, and here's what it feels like to sing that with no help from me. I'm not going to sing it along with you. I'm not going to sing it for you. We're not going to play the notes on the piano while you sing it. But it could be very, very simple. It could be as simple as a level 1. But that's because we only have 5 or 6 minutes, right? But then the idea is that we open up our repertoire and we have the rest of our rehearsal. Let's say we have a 50-minute rehearsal. For those of us who are privileged enough to see our kids every day. Let's say you've got that 50-minute rehearsal. The other 45 minutes, we're taking that same process that we just established, and we're applying it now to harder music that they probably do have in their auditory library, because all of our kids come into our classrooms with a quite a sophisticated library of music in their heads already. And they get it from Spotify, they get it from movies, they get it from TV shows, they get it from commercial jingles, those types of things. And we are simply their guide for helping them find those sounds that they already know in this more complicated piece of music. So what I mean when I say don't overkick your coverage or don't give them music that they don't have in their auditory library, what I mean is it's probably not a good idea to start a 9th grade beginning choir on some kind of an aleatoric, make up your own pattern, sing your own set of 7 diatonic notes at any time you want, singing Eric Whitacre songs where the clusters are not probably in their auditory library because they're not used to hearing pitches that are that dissonant with each other. So what I don't mean is don't do anything complicated, don't do anything fun and exciting that pushes their boundaries. Yes, do all those things, but do it in a sequential way that we build that music for performance in the same way through the same process that we taught them sight reading at the beginning of class. For example, a lot of things I present on the show and on social media related to no, kids really don't need to have the notes played for them. One of the most common responses I get is, well, yeah, sure, in high school. Well, my kids aren't old enough. But I would just respectfully share with everybody and remind everybody that the younger we do these things, the better they would be at them. Because it is the younger ages where our brains are the most plastic. So we all know this related to language and the processes that our brains use to acquire musical language are the same processes that are used to acquire all other sound that lives in our head. And when we teach these things to young kids, they actually get better at them faster. Which is, I think, I could never prove this. I'm not a researcher, but I think that when we come across some of these child prodigy type music people, music kids, I think that in almost every case, it's hard to find one of those kids that wasn't exposed to a ton of music at a really young age. And of course, yes, I'm a believer that talent is a thing that actually does exist too. Some kids, my son plays sports. There were kids on the t-ball field who just at age 5 picked up a bat and could swing it, and it looked pretty and the ball went far, and nobody had ever taught them how to do it. It was just they were good at it. So that does exist, but for the most part, the kids do need to have that ability cultivated. And they have to have those skills developed. So when we're talking about what types of things do our students need to know how to do early in the school year, these are the obvious things. I'm not going to say anything revolutionary here, but this would be things like, can they sing basic scales, arpeggiated patterns, etc., and can they learn to connect those to what they look like on the page? If they can get the basic ones, then they're going to be able to access almost all middle to easy level repertoire fairly quickly. So one of the things that we get to a lot in response is, well, I don't have time to teach all this stuff because we have a concert coming up soon. And of course, the response to that I always give is that we don't have time to not teach this stuff, because the better they get at it, the faster they will learn, and the easier it will be to choose repertoire. You'll get to the point, and this is at all ages, of course, age appropriate for what you're doing, but all ages, you'll get to a point where the learning of the music, in terms of like the learning of the notes and rhythms, can become the least stressful part of what you're doing, freeing you up to be worried about other things like their feelings and like what the song's about and whether or not they got COVID or whatever and they have to miss the concert. And like you're stressed about those things because those are the normal things that teachers should be stressed about. So that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of discuss tonight and get a really good sense of. So I'm going to take it back to Clinton's question that I started with a second ago. So doing repertoire that they can sequence together in 6 weeks, right? So I'll just tell a day in a life story from how my 9th grade choir would typically operate. So these are kids, in my scenario, these are kids that show up on the first day of school. I am fortunate that we do have a feeder program. So in terms of here is a pitch, we're not going to play anything, we're not going to sing anything for you, 1, 2, ready, go. They're exposed to the concepts, but they don't use it to learn repertoire. Okay, so my a cappella rehearsal episode, it's 135. I kind of illustrate to you what that first day of school is like, and I show a level 1 sight reading factory, unison, 8 measures, usually key of F for boys and girls. That's what I start on the first day of school. And because they're being asked to do it in a way they've never done it before, it typically takes us about 15 minutes to simply successfully sing those 8 measures. Because what I'm doing is I'm Well, this is my favorite part. I can't, it's like my first day of school is so much fun because I get to play an F and I get to go one, two, ready, sing. And then nothing happens. And they stare at me and they go, huh? And I say, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so do you hear this note I played? That's the starting note. Okay, here we go. Let's try it again. One, two, ready, and sing. Crickets. Because what they're used to is they're used to big energy. You guys got this. You guys got this? And then they're also used to somebody singing along with them, playing the notes along with them, so that what they contribute is almost nothing, and that the energy of the teacher is what is generating all of the singing. Okay, but I refuse on day one to give them that, and so then I like to ask my little kind of questions that make them start to engage. Like, so okay, so we sang the scale. You guys know what do re mi fa so sounds like, right? And they're like, yeah. Okay, sing it. So then they'll sing it. Do re mi fa so sounds beautiful. That's lovely. All right, let's look at this. So you know that first note is do, right? And they're like, yeah. And the note above that is re, right? They're like, yeah. So then you have all the information that you need so far. Let's just go ahead and start singing. And they eventually get over that hump, and that's why it takes 15 minutes. It's not because they don't know enough, or it's not because they don't have enough sound library in their head. It's because they're not used to being expected to just generate it on their own, right? And so what we do on that first day is we establish that is how music is going to be learned in this class. We're going to figure out, we're going to solve the problems. And so my steps are essentially play the tonic, sing a scale and arpeggio pattern of some kind, audiate through the exercise, have the kids learn how to hand sign, and there's on the first day of school, it's a lot of me pointing at the board and showing with my hands and doing like karaoke ball, pointing where they're supposed to look and all of those types of things. And we eventually get through that exercise, and it gets faster and it gets faster and it gets faster to the point where our ninth graders are typically doing level 5 and 6, 3 and 4 part harmony by March, April, because I don't relent. Like, I don't, like, when they start acting like it's too hard, we just go harder the next day. So part of it is that willingness to stick all the way with it. Okay, so that's how we start. Don, jump in, please. What was your thought?
First of all, let's say thank you to you for establishing this forum and doing all the hard work you've done. This is really a great opportunity for us to network beyond our classrooms. I think that one of the things I was most fearful of when I first started teaching back in the 70s is that someone who knew something would step into my classroom and find out I was a total fraud. And so it's hard to open up our hearts and souls to new and different ways from what we probably learned being in probably a pretty good choir in college or maybe even a good high school choir.
Mm-hmm.
My high school choir was that I sang in. Later, I went back to teach at that same high school. Was not what I would call an A-level choir. It was a B-level choir with a lot of talented kids, but not a director who could form us into a cohesive sound. So we had the enthusiastic director, and he was really a Pied Piper. I say that because I don't think we spent one day ever talking about how to sight read. Yet, because of the area we lived in, I'd say that maybe almost all of the chamber singers could play piano or play their parts. So that's a level of musicianship not many of us get to encounter when we come to school.
But Don said something earlier that I would like to get the whole group's feedback with our little our hand feature again. He talked about the college experience, being in a pretty good choir, being around a bunch of other people that were already pretty good as well, not talking a whole lot about how to sight read in the college choir environment. Is that true for anyone else? Like, we didn't spend a lot of time learning how to read music in college. Show of your little hand. Now, in the college choir, I should specify, a lot of us took like an oral skills class or a sight reading class, but I mean actually in choir. 20-something hands getting close to that now. Okay, how about, I won't go so fast. Yep, hands are coming back down. Okay, how about another one, which is those of us who are here in this meeting that got all the way through undergrad, whichever grad degrees you might happen to have, and didn't do any instrumental training as a kid at all. No piano lessons, no band, no orchestra, nothing but singing. Are there any people who have that experience? Alan, would you be willing to share how the heck that happened? There are lots of ways for you to get involved in the Choralosophy community. Of course, you can go over to choralosophy.substack.com and subscribe there for free or for pay if you would like to support the mission of this show. I would encourage you to do that. That's the place that we are now having contributions from the community, from people who are listening to the show, and from people who are wanting to add their voice to this conversation in the form of a blog. If you're interested in being a contributor to the Choralosophy community, email me at choralosophy@gmail.com and check out some of the submissions that are already there. I'm hoping for that program to really grow over the next year, so please consider reaching out.
Hi, Chris. Forgive my voice.
You're good.
How that happened is I grew up in a family of 5 boys. And so when it came to extra funding to pay for piano lessons, it never happened. So when I was young, I showed a lot of promise in basketball. I played basketball for 4 or 5 hours a day, and I just loved it, watching Michael Jordan in 92, 3, 4, 5, and 6, And so my parents saw that and said, well, you can get all the training you want for that for free from either the church basketball league you're in or from school. So they just had me do that, even though I asked and begged for instrumental training. And then coming up through middle school, you were forced to either do band or choir. And I had a twin brother who I didn't want to sit next to anymore. He chose band, so I went with choir. And so that was how I ended up subverting all the instrumental training I could have gotten. I never touched a piano till I was 19 years old and in community college.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So we saw there were only 2 or 3 hands up in the whole group for that question. And I want to share a little bit about why I asked that question. I think that a lot of the reasons, and I've said this on the show before, feel free to ask if you want me to clarify this, but I do think that as a profession, we teach music literacy wrong. And just by and large, and I think this is part of the reason that we teach it wrong, is because the vast majority of music educators, even in the choral area, we developed a pretty sophisticated audio library in our heads from instrumental training. And so then we get to our first choral setting, kind of like Don described, is we get to that college higher level setting where everybody has that. But if you've got 9th graders or 7th graders or 6th graders who have never seen these symbols before and don't know what a space to a space sounds like, they've got to have some kind of a frame of reference for what that sounds like. You can't just say, sing it on a neutral syllable, 1, 2, ready, go. So what we've learned when we grow up with our instrumental training, I grew up playing saxophone, took piano lessons, was in the church choir. My mom was a music director. I get to my first choir experience, and I don't need solfege, because I've already semi-memorized by 9th grade what those intervals and what those pitch patterns and those relationships sound like. So what happens to me, and this is kind of partly what I was talking about in my literacy is equity episode, is that when I got to school, I just thought I was smarter than everyone. That was how I interpreted, like, I can read this, why can't you read this? It's not that hard. And I'm looking around in a choir class where maybe half or 2/3 of the kids have never touched an instrument before. This is their first interaction with written music at all. And so that's where solfege comes in, is I just have not yet seen a better way to get kids to memorize these pitch relationships if it's their first interaction with something. I've messed around with numbers, I've messed around with other types of things, but for me, solfege is why I preach it so much, is because I'm trying to get at that third or so of kids that wouldn't learn how to read at all, music-wise, without some type of an auditory system in place. So that's why I think it's so important. I also think that creates a bias that we don't realize is there. So for example, I've seen people will come and say to me exactly what I just said. They'll say, well, we don't really need solfege. I didn't need solfege. And almost every time somebody says that to me on Facebook, I will ask them, did you take piano lessons as a kid? Yes. Okay. All right. That's why you don't need solfege. Because so far I've just talked about a whole bunch of things that are great in theory, but let's get into the classroom. Okay, Nellie, what do you got?
I find that between the solfege that I'm teaching at the level that they're currently at, like how I'm progressing that, doesn't always match with the level of rhythms there are in the music that we learn. And the pitches might like be okay for them to read, but the rhythms tend to be really hard. And I struggle to kind of sequence those together in a way that works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably my biggest challenge too. So Nellie, can you give us some examples? First of all, what level do you teach?
I teach high school and I just finished my first year.
Okay, so can you give me an example of a rhythmic pattern that would throw your kids for a loop and it would cause big frustration?
Yes, dotted quarter eighth note rhythm. And I saw somebody just said tied notes. Yeah, they were struggling with those too. But the dotted quarter eighth note rhythm was hard all year, and I swear I explained it to them like 15 different ways, and they were just not. It was not sticking.
Okay, so when you say it was a struggle, are you saying that it was a struggle to get as a sight reading mechanism that they're getting it the first time with no rehearsal, or you're saying that it was a struggle just you couldn't ever get them to get it right. The concert happened and we just couldn't get that dotted quarter eighth to be right ever. How would you explain that?
I think well, and inheriting my program, their reading skills are not totally like where I would expect them to be right now.
Uh-huh.
But so they're really used to learning by rote and learning from the piano playing the notes for them. And so that's going to be something to phase out of over several years, but they could get it if I like just had them repeat it after I played it for them or sang it for them, or they clap it and sing it at the same time or whatever. But then when it came to them like seeing it and having to do it themselves, they just could not.
They're gonna stumble and they're gonna have like a kind of a thing where they're thinking it out. And our instinct, I think, again, because of the biases we talked about before, our instinct is to say, nope, they didn't get it right. It's wrong. Which it is. But it's wrong in the same way that the 5 or 6 year old is wrong when they say the cat. Well, yeah, there's no in the word cat, but they got there. And I think actually what we need as music educators, we can do a better job of celebrating that because that's actually right and they have to do it. Like they have to sound it out. So what I tend to do, because we have that same problem especially in my beginning classes, is we get to those dotted quarter patterns and I resist doing it for them. I resist singing it for them, but we will take a lot of clapping it together, speak it together, sing it together. Oh, you did it wrong again. Got to go back to the beginning of the sequence. Okay, let's clap it. And we get that going. Attach the solfege. Do, re, do, re, do, re, do. Now sing it. Do, re, do, right? And then I usually take that little sequence without stopping right back into the music and just use my hands, kind of guide so that the flow goes right back up to the music, and then they sing it. Now, will that fix it every time? No. Will they have to do that sequence again tomorrow? Yes. But those are the types of things that we like to try.
Chris, you're raising such an important issue, and I think what the topic here becomes is best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give an example to the whole group. What would you think out in your mind if you saw this on a test from 1/3 of your students? 4/4 time, quarter note, 2/8 notes, quarter note, 2/8 notes. And I asked them to put the numbering underneath it. So it should be 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? Why would I get from over a third of the class, almost half of the class, every single semester for 5 years? I taught the class, by the way, 36 years. And it took me the 5 years to figure this out. Why would I get 1, 2, and 3, and 4? Because the first thing I went to was that the eighth note gets half a beat. But what the students are coming from in their math mind is that numbers start with 0, and in music, numbers start with 1. And 1 to 2 is 1, and 2 to 3 is 2, and 3 to 4 is 3, and 4 to 1 over the bar line is 4. So their logic said, well, if the beginning of the measure starts with 1, then the end of the measure should have 4.
Yeah.
It was very logical.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
so super logical. And so by getting them to understand that 4 started at position 4, not just the last note of the measure, then the tie thing started to clean up because I realized that that was exposing their lack of inner rhythm, that they were not able to keep the beat and understand that it was 1 and 3 and 1 and 3, that disappeared. And so they were kind of doing what you demonstrated, Chris. They were kind of going 1 and 3. They weren't, because the 2 wasn't there. In fact, if you think about it, the dot in all dotted rhythms is actually just the beat.
So if anybody who is in that group that has no levels, you've got no levels, and would be willing to turn on their mic, turn on their camera or whatever it is, and share with us what is life like when you are not able to separate out kids based on their prior knowledge, their ability, their age, etc. Nathaniel, what's that like? Or Rita, that's fine. Yeah,
I'm here.
yeah, go ahead.
And we've been talking about this kind of in the chat already. My situation is that I have a theater school that really just basically doesn't sing with the kids. They do everything musical except singing. So I start with 6th grade brand new, and I can barely get them to do anything. So I really start level 1 with my 7th graders. And so when I get them in high school, I have a lot of kids who still just are really not there. And then I have some other kids who just have picked up on it really quick and are doing really great. Or I've got seniors who have been with me long enough that they can. And so I started, I think it was last year, changing up the way I did sight reading. So I don't do sight reading the same every day. One day we do like chaos where they have a minute to look at it and then we all sing it together. One day we might do it the way we do it contest. But one of the things that I found that has worked best with my kids is that I leveled them into groups. So I have a level 1 group, I have a level 2 group, I have a level 3 group. My most advanced group will go and do sight reading in 3 parts or 4 parts and do fine. But it gives me time to work with those level 1, level 2 groups a little bit more while the other ones are all kind of doing their own thing.
Okay.
And they only do what we let them do, exercises that they are able to do. And then maybe, so we start literally with do, re, and then we might add me, and then we add sol, do, or whatever. And that has worked wonders, and the kids love it. They're every once in a while I have somebody who wants to be in a different group, but most of the time they are appreciative of the fact that they're working with other people who are doing the same struggle that they have.
Well, that's awesome, and it sounds like you must have done some type of groundwork to make the kids not feel like there's like the smart group and the dumb group, but they've all got everybody's in the same boat. I know that can be a challenge sometimes to create that kind of class within a class
Yeah, we talk
system.
about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like it. That's really good. Oh, and I think that's a great example. How about you, Rita?
Well, I teach 7th and 8th grade, and we have intermediate schools. So 6th grade, the 6th grade coming into 7th grade at feeder school haven't had a consistent teaching. They either didn't have teachers, and so when I get the kids, they're not wanting to be in choir, but they're placed in choir. So what I do with them, start out with the rhythm, and just get them marching and moving. And then when I teach them the hand signs, I do hand sign stations, and so I teach them a routine just to get them focused on moving those hands up and down the ladder. And I know they give me an advanced choir, but it really isn't advanced at all, because some of the kids that are in there have never been in choir before, or they don't have the skills. So I just start at the very beginning. On the first day, I teach it like I would do a choir camp to pull them in and get that connection going. And then we go from there. And then they'll echo me, then they have to show me. And it does work. But the other part that makes it hard for my class is that 7th grade, we have staggered release. So I never have the kids all at the same time until like after the 8th grade gets there. And then when it's time, 7th grade goes out and the 8th grade doesn't go out for another 2 minutes, but the new 7th graders are coming in. So it's just been real hard trying to to get everything working. But the kids that are in I have one class I would call the advanced group. That's what they're labeled as. But those girls really work together to where I could just walk around the room. I had some good leadership. I really taught them leadership skills, and they really helped each other. And that's what made us successful. The
Yeah.
sight reading was so much better this year, in terms of me just walking around the room, being the manager. And so,
Yeah. That's the goal. That's awesome. Yeah. Now I do have a question, Rita. I have a question about something you said earlier, where you said they have a class that you teach. They call it advanced, but it's not really advanced, and that raised a question for me: is how do you decide in your school environment then who is in this class that is called advanced? Is it audition, or do you assign it? How does that work?
the kids have to request choir. And
Oh. Yeah, no,
uh,
it's really an amazing thing that we take for granted. Where if a kid wants to be in choir, that is a pretty good predictor that they're going to learn how to do it if we teach it to them. They
right.
kind of they kind. It's almost like the wanting to be there is in some ways part of the audition. Yeah, and we take that for granted. But that's awesome, Rita. Thank you so much. Bruce, tell us about your environment.
Okay, well, I can tell you about one of the classes that I teach because I do have a couple more advanced classes where the students they've either been with me for at least a year, so they have some literacy skills, or more. But my training choir is a 9 through 12 Yalcum choir, and there really is all levels in there. And I have a lot of freshmen who are taking choir for the first time. I have some freshmen who might have taken choir in one of the sort of very limited programs that are in the middle schools where I'm at, and then there's also another category of students, juniors, seniors, who are in there, and maybe that's their second choir. So these are maybe some of my chamber singers, and they want a second choir. They want another choir that's maybe a little bit more fun, that they can be with their friends, right? And I found that that's really important, that we provide them an experience where they can sing with their friends. Because if you got juniors and seniors out in your campus, and all you really have for them is a freshman choir, they're not going to be coming through your door. So I try to get more juniors and seniors in my Yalcum, in my training choir, so we have some really sort of advanced all-state sort of kids in that choir, and we have real beginners who have problems matching pitch. So so it's a real mixed bag, and what I do two things primarily that differentiate things. I use the 1 minute theory for choir books as bell ringers, and these I place the students in according to like a placement test that I give them at the beginning of the year. So they're in their own level of the theory work, and I also let them work ahead by giving them extra credit for taking quizzes through those books, and I give them extra credit in all these some extrinsic motivators, we would say, to get them to work fast. And some kids, they burn it up. They really love working really fast, so they work really fast through the theory stuff, and of course that informs the sight singing work and everything else. So they're on different levels, and they're working in different speeds according to whatever it is they want to do. And then for my sight reading factory work, I have 3 different levels. Okay, so and those aren't attached to ensembles or grade levels; they're just attached to ability. So, I'll place my stronger singers in the, higher level, and then the beginners will be in the level 1, right? So that there's 3 different types of levels, and even some of the students who are with me in one of the more advanced choirs, they're not all on level 3, right? Some of them are on level 2, or even a couple are on level 1 if they need that extra work. So just that's how I kind of try to work with this challenge of everybody's coming at me with different prior knowledge and different abilities.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And one of the questions that I get a lot too is because I advocate this whole teach kids to learn independently, a cappella, no external source, and then we talk about how do we rehearse in choir? Well, aren't other kids that read it faster going to sing into their ear, and aren't they going to hear the right answer from someone else anyway? And I'm like, yeah, no, actually they are. But at any given point, and this is kind of ties directly into this classroom, because even in my leveled system that I have, we still have diversity of level within a beginning level class. We have diversity of level within an advanced level class. So I might have it easier than some in that way, but you still have to deal with these ideas. I'm still going to have the kid who, when she's the piano lesson kid, we'll call her the piano lesson kid, and she came into ninth grade and she could already play really complicated things on the piano. Her auditory library is going to be more advanced. She's going to develop her sight reading skills faster, which means that she's also going to sing the right notes in the choir rehearsal and help lead her section to the right notes, right? So that is important, because what that's doing for the kid who's next to her is that she's also then helping the kid next to her develop her auditory library so that it can advance, which is why I advocate so strongly for, in almost every environment that we can, that we're doing this work with groups, but we're also doing individual work with students, so that the girl who does the piano lessons doesn't do all the work for everyone all the time. So we do the individual work. We also do, this is something I do quite a bit, and this is a trick that I would recommend everyone trying if you don't already, but I have my sopranos and my altos and my tenors and basses. I have my soprano ones, tenor ones, basses, all those things. I have all the divisions that everyone else does. But at the beginning of a term, I also give kids numbers, 1 through 6, or 1 through 8, depending on how many kids are in the choir total. And then in rehearsal, we have these different things where, let's say in this example, piano lesson girl is in group 1. And I can tell piano lesson girl is getting all of the right answers, and it's causing everyone to think that they're reading this music really well too, but it's really just her, right? And I don't want to make anyone feel stupid, but at the same time, I want to make sure that she's not doing all the work. So I know she's in group 1. So I might say, okay, group 2, sing measure 3. Ready, go. All right, they're struggling because now she's not singing, right? Okay, so all right, now group 3, take a shot at it. Okay, now it's your turn. They're going to sing it. And all the while, everybody's hearing what happens when group 1's not singing. Okay, then I don't have to say anything. Kids are smart. They know that it was piano lesson girl doing all the work, and we don't have to talk about it. Nobody has to feel embarrassed, but it gives the kids a very critical information about, oh, I thought I knew this, but I guess I don't. And so now let's zero in, and I might say things like, okay, group 2, we're going to do this again until you get it. And we're not going to put group 1 back in until we've gotten it. Then we put it back together. Typically, group 1 and group 2 are now sound better than they've ever sounded, because they are listening to each other as well. So these are good things. So now we're still going to stay on this topic for just a little bit. I want to show you guys something. You've seen it. You probably have seen it if you're a diehard, but I want to use it in this conversation, which is my reading rope, because it is very much related to the conversation that we are having. Hopefully you can see this now. So this is a graphic that I created for episode 174, and this is my attempt to try to connect our science of reading, the knowledge that our reading colleagues have for how brains like to read, and then I've taken it and I've adapted it for a musician, for the music classroom. And this is specific for a singer learning to read music, which is a wholly different process, as we discussed earlier, than a piano player learning to read music, where I press down the right key at the right time, and the right pitch is going to come out, assuming the piano is tuned, right? But for a singer, they don't have access to that. Their process is actually a lot closer to how a speaker would learn to read, because they've got to learn to look at the symbols, hear that sound in their head, and then coordinate all the muscles that are necessary to reproduce that sound that they see on the page. So that's very difficult. To make this work for an episode, that's all you get, but you can hear more of lots of great ideas from this session, the entire session, by joining the group of paid subscribers that keep this show rolling. over at patreon.com/Choralosophy or choralosophy.substack.com. Both offer paid subscription options, and you can find the rest of this work session at either of those locations. Thank you all for listening to this episode. As always, the way that we keep Choralosophy moving into the future. We just hit 5 years, and the way we hit 5 more years and continue to grow and expand, the way that this platform can be valuable to you, the listener, and can continue to be valuable to the music education landscape is you being involved. The ways that you can be involved, of course, are entering the Choralosophy promo code at all the websites that allow that. They are amazing partners that have been with us mostly since the beginning. That's sightreadingfactory.com, mymusicfolders.com. That is also endeavorpublishing.com and graphitepublishing.com. You can also, of course, go over to Ludus and check out their products. You can do the things directly for the show that help, like go to patreon.com/Choralosophy and chip in $3 a month. And if you can't do any of those things, I just want you to join the conversation. So head on over to the Choralosophers Facebook page, like, share, leave comments anywhere that you're able to see the content. Those help other people see the content and join the conversation as well. We are building a movement here, and we want you to be a part of it. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.